we've been testing a variety of different crops to grow in veggie. We began with leafy greens, specifically this red romaine lettuce, which was selected because of its small size, its high growth rate, its excellent germination, and also the lettuce has very low natural microbial levels associated with it, so it would be safe for the crew to eat. The astronauts harvested the lettuce that's been growing for 33 days, and the harvest had two parts. First, they harvested some leaves from each plant for consumption, and they had a little bit of a celebration, and then they harvested the rest of the plants for our science. So those plants were harvested into foil and frozen in the -80 freezer on ISS, and they'll be returned to us to do analysis of that tissue. In terms of how safe the food is, we assessed that by first growing a set of lettuce in space and having it returned to Earth last year, where we tested a number of different aspects of that crop. We looked at the food safety of that crop, and we didn't find anything that led us to believe that it wouldn't be safe to eat. To grow enough food, to support the crew takes up a lot of volume in a spacecraft where volume is very expensive and it's limited. We're trying to grow highly productive plants and plants that are a very small stature, and so we select crops that have a very high edible proportion of their yield. This is called the harvest index, the proportion of the edible biomass to the total biomass. For the first crew to Mars, they're probably not going to have a lot of food processing or food preparation equipment, and they may not even have cooking equipment. And that's how it is on the space station right now. They don't actually have an ability to cook any food up there. So all of the food that they're growing is what we call pick and eat. It has to be able to be eaten fresh. So we've been looking at lettuce, other leafy green vegetables, dwarf tomatoes, dwarf peppers, radish, potentially some herbs that can be picked and mixed in with a packaged diet. And we're even starting to look at small fruit crops. We've been testing some dwarf plum trees. But again, these are all things that can be eaten fresh. Once we are established on Mars and we have a long-term base, we may have more equipment to be able to process and cook food. And so then things like sweet potatoes or white potatoes or beans could easily be grown and used to provide food for the diet. And so we're testing both types of scenarios, but for now we're concentrating on what could be cooked or what could be picked and eaten without cooking. So we've had a lot of feedback from different crew members who were on the space station during the first veggie test and also during the second test where they were allowed to eat the produce. In the first test, I think the crew actually really wanted to eat the lettuce, but they were good. They sent it all back to us. But the consensus was that we need to be growing more vegetables in space station, that they really want to grow things that they can eat more than ornamental crops, and that this is something that the different astronauts really couldn't imagine going for longer or farther into space without having this little slice of Earth there to remind them of home. They all really enjoyed the first harvest of lettuce. All the astronauts and cosmonauts were around watching and taking photographs, and we had numerous comments and photos throughout the growth cycle about how much they enjoyed watching the plants grow and helping to mark the passage of time. In this grow out, again, we had a lot of really positive feedback from the crew. Basically, they were all there for the harvest except the Russian cosmonauts who were out on an extravehicular activity, and the astronauts saved some of the lettuce for the cosmonauts to eat for when they finished their EVA, which was really wonderful. When they ate the first batch of lettuce, their comments were very supportive and enthusiastic, and they seemed to really enjoy it. So that just made me feel wonderful that I was able to help be part of a team that could provide them with such a source of enjoyment. One thing we really hope is that the crew will be able to pick which types of plants that they want to grow in the future. So we're working to develop a crew garden mentality where they can select which crops that they'll want to grow and then eat them. So we have, a lot of steps to get through to get there, but I don't see any roadblocks in the way.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Massa. So, two questions for you. How many days from seed in space, from propagation to a harvested plant with the astronauts, how many days? Yes?
I think it was 33.
It was exactly 33 days. So, do you think that's slow? Is that fast? Is that normal production from seed from propagation to an edible biomass? What do you think? How many of you are farmers? How long does it take you to grow lettuce when you put the seed in your garden? Food production, no? It's a longer period of time than 33 days on Earth. So the fact that we're able to produce that in 33 days is a big advantage. In space, the question is, can we use NASA technology in a spin-off and grow food and grow lettuce on Earth in that type of speed and that technology? What's the temperature on the ISS freezer? Negative 80 Celsius. That's a heck of a freezer. So it's an amazing technology. You can read all about that freezer technology on science at nasa.gov or nasa.gov. But think about the energy and the power to be able to do that in space. Again, every time I hear that, it's just minus 80 C freezer. Okay, what about the species selection she spoke about? It has to have two very important things. What are they? You guys might be on YouTube, so you gotta give answers. Anyway, two things she said. Has to have low what?
Number of microbes.
Low microbial potential. So in other words, it's not going to get diseased easily. And they're not going to use chemical pesticides or fungicides or anything like that in space. So low microbial potential. Very good. What else? Yes.
High crop yield.
High edible biomass or high crop yield. So in other words, an easy to grow plant that's not going to get diseased and a plant that's going to give you a big, more edible biomass, more productivity. Do you think those potential attributes to a plant are important for Earth production? If we had plants that didn't get diseased readily and then gave us a lot of edible food, would that be important on our farms? Am I at Pineview? You're supposed to say very important for Earth production. Okay. So, let's go, all right, hold on a second, thank you. So the historic date was Monday, August 10th, 2015, when lettuce, which were grown in space, were harvested by our astronauts and they were able to consume it. That was a very important day because sustainable food production is the next real step to manned space travel. Next slide. This is Scott Kelly, Kiel Lindgren, 3 astronauts, and Kimiya Yui from JAXA, Japanese astronaut, and they're enjoying the space-grown red romaine lettuce that was produced with our fertilizer product as part of the veggie program. So this is the type of grow box that NASA has developed to produce plants in space. You can see the light color is kind of a pinkish hue, and it's a blend of red and blue wavelengths. So before we show you this video, what do you think the difference of trying to grow vegetables in space and on Earth, what are the key scientific issues and problems that the NASA scientists, the brilliant NASA scientists, had to cope with over the last several years? What's different? Space and Earth. Yes?
How to get sun to the plants.
Light. Because there's not a lot of light in space. Space technically is black. Now you have some sunlight as you rotate, but essentially the creation of light in space is very important. That's one. What else?
Gravity.
gravity or the lack thereof into also. So light, gravity, because you have microgravity. So just taking that microgravity further, what happens to water in microgravity? You gotta get water to the roots of the plant, but what happens to water in microgravity?
Forms of globular formations that are just flowing down.
It floats in a glob in the atmosphere. So imagine these brilliant scientists all those years ago. We want to grow vegetables in space. Water floats. How are we going to get water to the roots? We don't have a light source that we can depend on. We've got to create light. And we've got to cope with microgravity. Do you think those NASA scientists are pretty brilliant because they were able to cope with it, as this video is going to tell you? But what else can't we do, or that we do on Earth that we can't do in space? Anybody? I got a few of them. There's two more.
The use of pesticides.
You're not going to use pesticides, so you're not going to use soil medium that has bacteria in it. So you want to use an inert. So you have to replace soil with something else. It's got to be inert. And so, you know, they also found that medium too to grow vegetables in space. And what about the roots? What about the roots of a plant? You think the roots in microgravity are going to behave properly? Again, I want you to think like those NASA scientists 10 years ago. What do roots do in microgravity? What do they do in gravity? They grow down into the soil medium. But as you'll see in this video, in microgravity, the roots can grow in all different directions. So you have a totally different emerging science that had to be dealt with by NASA to be able to come up with this amazing science of being able to grow vegetables in space.
Historic vegetable moment on the space station, presented by Science at NASA. On August 10th, astronauts on the International Space Station sampled their first space-grown salad and pronounced it good. They were treated to freshly harvested red romaine lettuce grown in the veggie plant growth chamber, a special structure designed to make gardens flourish in weightlessness. On Earth, garden flora battles such foes as cutworms, aphids, slugs, root maggots, blights, and rots. But weightlessness is one thing no earthly vegetation encounters. In a weightless environment, there is no up and down, so roots grow in all directions. Water and substrate, the materials used to anchor these plants and allow for root growth, tend to float away. With veggie, these problems are solved by using plant pillows, bags of substrate with space dirt and controlled release fertilizer. Wicks are implanted in the bags to draw water into the substrate and provide a place to glue the seeds, which are oriented so roots will grow down into the substrate and shoots that emerge will push out of the bag. LEDs furnish light for photosynthesis and give the shoots a sense of direction so they keep growing upward. The walls of the veggie chamber can expand to make room for the growing crop. According to astronaut Scott Kelly's taste buds, this special space-tailored arrangement works.
Tastes good. Yeah. I have that. Kind of like arugula. Yeah. It's fresh. It's on.
He explains the importance of growing such culinary delights in space. If we're going to Mars someday, there's going to be a long period of time where we're going to have to be self-sufficient. And having the ability for us to grow our own food is a big step in that direction. The astronauts celebrated this historic vegetable moment by toasting their lettuce leaves and shouting, "Cheers!" Before long, they'll be toasting cabbage, tomatoes, and more. The next SpaceX delivery will supply some of the seeds. We will be sending up seeds for a small cabbage that is very highly rated for flavor and additional red romaine lettuce, says Joy Yamasa, veggie payload scientist at Kennedy Space Center. We are working on crop selection with dwarf tomatoes and dwarf peppers. Upcoming experiments will use various ratios of red and blue lights and different fertilizers in attempts to improve crop yield, nutrition, and flavor both on Earth and in space. Other botanical treats are planned for the astronauts as well. We have additional seeds on board the station, says Masa. These are zinnias, really pretty daisy-like flowers that help us understand longer duration growing plants that have to flower in space, such as tomato. That kind of enjoyment is expected to be an important added bonus to veggie. I think the psychological benefit of growing plants in space will be incalculable, she says. Having living plants can help with stress and increase the crew's enjoyment. Growing plants can provide the sights, smells, and tastes of Earth. Fresh produce could add a variety and interest to the diet, and the textures of fresh vegetables, crunchy, juicy, could add a new dimension to the packaged diet. Scottish poet Alexander Smith said it best: "How deeply seated in the human heart is the liking for gardens and gardening." Apparently, the same is true of human hearts in space. For more from the International Space Station, go to www.nasa.gov/station. For more nutritious news from Earth orbit and beyond, stay tuned to science.nasa.gov.
Very important website, science.nasa.gov. And we're just going to move ahead to slide 38. We don't have time to do all this today. So, we spoke about the light. So it's blue and red wavelengths are the minimum needed to get good plant growth and are the most efficient in terms of electrical power conversion. So this is the response to the inability to have a constant or an available light source in space. It's a created blue and red wavelength. Now what you have to start thinking to yourselves is, does that have application on Earth? Are there ways we can use that, since we can grow vegetables in a difficult environment in space? Can we have a spin-off NASA technology and use that on Earth? And the answers are going to be yes, and we're going to show you some examples. This is the silica clay. This is the arsenite silica clay. So one of the keys when you replace soil and get rid of the microbes is use an inert medium with a high CEC. CEC stands for cation exchange capacity. That's the ability of the soil medium to move the fertilizer into the roots, into the plant. The higher the CEC, the better. And this particular soil medium or medium is very high CEC, one of the highest. So that's critical. If you're growing any type of plants or vegetables on Earth, you must use or try to find high CEC. So those are two things learned from NASA that we can do here. Okay? So these next two slides are about microgravity. And although not my science, they're very important for you to understand this difficulty that the NASA scientists have coped with. On Earth, we have a gravity of 1. That's our base. That's what keeps us grounded. Mars will have about 1/3 the gravity. And on ISS, it's micro. Literally no gravity unless it's our own mass creating it. So when you have microgravity, this next video, this is an example of what happens to water in space.
Start bringing it up. It's really wet.